Folks, the World Championships in London has been concluded for a few days now. Of course, we know who the winner is, Eduardo Cunha. Congrats to him. Today, I'd like to go over the top four match between Eduardo and Paul Chua. And I think a lot of people would agree this was a highlight of the tournament, this match. It had everything. I mean, it had incredibly patient play by both players. It had volatile sleep turns. It had tons of switching. It had surprising Dynamaxes. I mean, it was edge of your seat type stuff. But specifically in this video, I want to go over how both of these players put on a masterclass when it comes to positioning. And of course, it's no surprise. I think all of you know that Edu wound up winning this match, but really both players played exceptionally, completely deserved to be in this top four. We're on top of their games. So let's get into it. And first thing we have to acknowledge, I guess, when talking about this kind of positioning type of match is team preview. How do the players lead and what do they bring? It's not like the good old days where they actually showed team preview, so we're looking at this screen here. Let me pull it up. That would be good, wouldn't it? Here we go. So I think from Edu's end, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think that he's pretty much always going to bring Gastrodon, Calyrex, Incineroar, and Zacian. The Thundurus and the Rillaboom are not entirely out of the question, but they just don't do enough. They don't do enough damage to Paul's main threats, and they just have to watch out for that Calyrex Ice Rider so much because they're weak to ice. And yeah, I think from his end it's pretty straightforward. I mean, he could definitely mix up what he wants to lead, but in terms of the four he brings to the match, it's going to be those four. Paul Chua, on the other hand, with his team, I think there's more flexibility, and you do see that from him in this match. We'll see that. We'll see it when we get to it. But I mean, Regieleki is an offensive threat. You know, it outspeeds everything. Really only has to worry about the Gastrodon because Rillaboom's realistically probably not being brought. So that's, I mean, Regieleki's bringable. But I think it's the one Pokemon that Paul never brought to this set. And so certainly the other five are quite good into Edu's team as well. And Edu's team is, I mean, it's been around for like 6 months at this point in the metagame. So Paul's certainly practiced against it. He in the very least, he knows, I'm sure, what to bring to a game one and what to lead. But I just wanted to point out that there's more flexibility, I think, on Paul's end than there is on Edu's end in terms of the four that they bring to the match. So let's get into this. I'm going to play at ×2 speed, which I haven't done yet in my videos, but I'd like to see if I can kind of get through this a little faster, but I'll maybe slow down or pause on some of the crucial parts. But it's a long set, so here we go. Mugus and Palkia, Calyrex and Incineroar. So obviously Paul Chua's team wants to set up Trick Room. It functions well under Trick Room. For the most part, it doesn't want to be out of Trick Room that much. Eduardo's team is not a Trick Room team, but it has pieces that come to the Trick Room matchup and are comfortable against it, like Incineroar, like Gastrodon. So Edu's main goal here is survive through the Trick Room turns and position himself in such a way that he does not get blown back by the offense of Paul's team. He doesn't get outpositioned. And on Paul's end, of course he didn't set Trick Room on this turn one here, but on his end, he's got to make the most of his Trick Room turns. And also while positioning and not taking too much damage from the Calyrex, the Zacian, not getting caught by a Yawn from Gastrodon. So there's Trick Room. Gastrodon's in a good spot. And Paul was able to break the Focus Sash on Calyrex, which is really nice for him. And the Incineroar HP stat is 171. Not the first time we've seen that in this tournament. That indicates most likely very fast Incineroar, offensive Incineroar, and Focus Sash. And you'll see her Earth Power does a ton. Now that's a big miss, Spatial Rend miss onto the Incineroar. Neither player wants to commit a Dynamax. I mean, you could Dynamax Calyrex here, but the thing is that the Gastrodon just puts on so much pressure with Yawn, so you don't want to Dynamax and then get caught sleeping. And Paul is going to really try to focus down on the Gastrodon when he can, because that Yawn is so annoying. And he doesn't have a good way to keep his team from going to sleep. So White Herb revealed on Calyrex is really big. Not Babiri Berry and not Weakness Policy. Very good for Edu to know if you didn't know that already. So the Palkia has been parting shotted. It's not doing a ton of damage, but the Flamethrower is a really good tech for Edu to know about. But Zacian took that well. Gets another Intimidate down. So more positioning. And the Protect. So this was big for Edu. Pause it here. He managed to kind of have an ambiguous turn there. So from Paul's end, he knows Edu's got Gastrodon and Zacian on the field, and Gastrodon's in a good spot. But Paul knows that Incineroar probably wants to switch in on one of the slots. So he's like, I'm going to double the Zacian slot with a high horsepower and a Flamethrower. If Zacian stays in and attacks, which would be odd, honestly, under Trick Room, but if it does, it's going to get KO'd with the double up. And if Incin switches in on that slot, it's going to take a high horsepower, which is going to do decent damage. But Edu kind of makes the step ahead play of, I'm going to switch out my Gastrodon, which, Paul, you think is in a good spot, and you don't think I'm going to switch it out, but I'm going to swap out my Gastrodon for Incineroar, protect Zacian, and take no damage this turn, and now I have a fresh Fake Out. Good play. And you got to make those plays. From Edu's point of view, you got to make those defensive plays to get you through these Trick Room turns. But Paul is conserving his energy, you could say, his pieces, his Dynamax. I mean, he's not playing his cards too heavily here at all. So Incin comes back in. Another parting shot on Palkia. I think this is the last turn of Trick Room, yeah, because Edu gets in both of his fast, powerful Pokemon here. The burn on Zacian. Getting burned by a Flamethrower on your Zacian in top 4 of World has got to be a rough feeling. Astral Barrage is going to do a lot. So Edu's waiting for these moments where Trick Room has run out, and he has Calyrex on the field, and he can do some damage, finally. And now Trick Room's back up, and Edu has to once again play the very delicate, very careful, defensive, switching type of game, while also not being too obvious on what he's doing, because he doesn't want Paul to get a read on what he's doing too much. But there you go. Paul knew the Protect was coming from Calyrex, because why wouldn't he do Protect there? And he side Pollen Puffs, and that's not going to be the last time he gets healing on Pokemon here. Edu's playing well. I mean, he's doing really great, but he's on the back foot. That self-healing from Paul, and just the slow chipping that Paul is doing is adding up. Another good switch from Edu, but again, 2 more turns of Trick Room. Not comfortable at all. And Palkia is back in, and its special attack is reset. So Edu finally commits the Dynamax. By the way, I think it's like turn is it like turn 8 or 9 now? And there's not been a KO taken. So he finally commits the Dynamax, does not get a KO. And of course, this isn't really what Edu wants. Edu doesn't want to have to Dynamax his Incineroar in this matchup. But he found himself in the position where he was like, you know what? At this point, I think this is just what I have to do. I think Paul's happy to see this. He's got his pieces healthy, and he can do, yeah, he can just Spore. That is a KO. Okay. Now it's interesting that Paul chose to bring in his Calyrex Ice here. Trick Room just ran out. And he didn't bring in his faster Pokemon, Palkia. He is now. He chose not to set up Trick Room. He just did damage. He knew that Calyrex would live as long as it doesn't get crit there. Does a lot of damage to Gastrodon. The Gastrodon really needs to take damage while it's asleep because, again, yawn pressure is so strong for Edu. And now, funny enough, Paul's got the fastest Pokemon on the field in Palkia, and he can Dynamax it now. Yep, take out the Incin, and then Calyrex is faster than the Gastrodon. Oh, he sets up Trick Room. Yeah, makes sense. But I think this is Gastrodon's last turn of sleep, or I think that was. And he's going to be the slowest Pokemon on the field now, so he's going to move first in Trick Room. Sorry, that's a female Gastrodon. She's going to move first in Trick Room. And going to get a yawn off, probably. So this is good for Paul, but it's still a little dicey. But he goes for Protect. Yeah. I mean, he could have gone for Yawn there. But then he would have just gotten KO'd. So Edu wanted to stay alive, get a little leftovers recovery. So Paul here, he wants to be wary of a Zacian switch. He doesn't have Max Quake on this Palkia. He's got Dragon, Water, and Fire. And of course, you can't go for Water-type moves when Gastrodon's on the field. And you don't want to Max Dragon into a potential Zacian switching in. So, but that's going to do it. Really great choice from Paul. I mean, he got the Intimidate down on Edu's Incineroar, so it wasn't doing too much damage. He maxed his Palkia, but he was in such a position where his Calyrex could safely set up Trick Room, and he could just go from there. Click Glacial Lance, and Palkia really didn't even have to do that much while it was Dynamaxed. But Paul got the positioning there. So Edu, he brought the right Pokemon. So I think moving forward, he's probably thinking to himself, okay, I kind of was backed into a corner there, and I had to Dynamax Incineroar, but that's not really what I want to do. Like, I want to Dynamax Calyrex if I can. I think even Gastrodon is a better Dynamax than Incineroar, just because Gastrodon takes hits so well. And keeping it healthy is so big so that it can go for yawns. And Paul has the flexibility now, just because of his team composition and the matchup, to change things up. He could go with all kinds of modes here. He could go Fake Out Trick Room. There it is. He could lead Regieleki. And Edu changes it up too, right? Yeah, because he led Incineroar, Calyrex, Shadow Rider in game one. Now he's got his double restricteds out, and he just goes for damage. That's not going to do too much, of course, but why not? Yep. And since that Incineroar has no bulk, it just goes down to a not very effective attack and to a intimidation. That's a big start for Edu. But he didn't really have a safe switch in. I mean, you don't want to switch your Calyrex Ice into a Astral Barrage. So Edu won the lead war there. Paul could have faked out the Zacian, but ooh, good protect. Wow. I mean, Edu is swinging this in his favor so quickly. What a contrast from game one. This game two is flying by already. So Paul, you know, he's got like no health on his Calyrex, but he's like, well, what else am I gonna do here? I'm not gonna Dynamax Porygon, and kind of gives you the feeling he doesn't have a Palkian back. He probably has a Mungus. So that's a big turn. Gets the KO. Neuters the special attack of Edu's Calyrex Shadow Rider, and it can't pick up the KO. Now this is a big turn. This is a mind game turn. This is obviously Gastrodon. It underspeeds the Calyrex and can Dynamax here, and can Max Quake the Calyrex and KO it. Now, does Edu read into a Max Guard? Because Paul knows that play is on the table. Does Edu read into a Max Guard and Max Quake? Are actually really the better play would be to yawn the Porygon, expecting the Max Guard, but no. He just goes for the straightforward play, Max Quakes. Paul does not Max Guard his Calyrex, and that is a fainted Calyrex. And I thought this was really questionable from Paul, honestly. It seemed like it was very safe to Max Guard the Calyrex Ice there and to Eerie Impulse the Gastrodon, because Gastrodon, you have to imagine it's Dynamaxing there. It's at full health, it's under Trick Room. And the Calyrex Ice is just such a huge threat in terms of damage, so Edu has to take it out. So I'm surprised that Paul didn't make the Max Guard play. It was like a little bit punishable with a yawn the P2, but still very much worth it, I think. And now Paul's like, he really doesn't have much going for him at all. It's not over though, because you think about how is Edu going to take out the Porygon 2? In the back, he has a Calyrex Shadow Rider, which can only click Snarl into Porygon 2 to hit it for damage, but Porygon 2 doesn't mind that at all, because it does no damage practically. And Porygon 2 only has Foul Play as its attacking move. So, and Gastrodon's like not really doing any damage to Porygon 2, and Porygon 2 can click Recover a bunch of times to get its health back. So really the best way for him to do damage, Edu, to the Porygon 2 is to use Incineroar with physical attacks like Flare Blitz. And the Amoonguss survives on 1 HP there, but he has to take down the Amoonguss, of course, because Amoonguss is just so disruptive. But this isn't over. Gastrodon falls asleep. Protect is obvious, but he has to do it, and that first turn wake up there from Gastrodon more or less seals this game too, because he can just wake up and go for yawns. And you know, I think it would have been really interesting if Gastrodon stayed asleep for another turn or two, because Paul could have chipped the Incineroar with Pollen Puff on Amoonguss and Foul Play, and it would have just put him a little closer to being able to edge that one out, honestly, because Flare Blitz is his best damage dealing move, but he's taking recoil when he uses it, and the Porygon 2 can click Recover so much, even if it is taking some yawns, As long as he takes out the Incineroar, he's Idu's Pokemon aren't doing damage, pretty much, and he can just recover. So I think that was a very fortunate first turn wake up for Edu and his Gastrodon. Okay, on to game 3. So Paul's probably like, I don't want to lead that again. That did not work. Yeah. Going back to game 1, both of them go back to game 1 leads. So in this match, I want to highlight the snowball effect in these long, drawn-out positioning type matches. What I mean by this snowball effect is when one little thing swings towards one of the players in terms of momentum, and then another little thing and another little thing, and eventually it leads to a victory. But in these long drawn out matches, it really is those little increments. So Paul goes for a similar turn 1 play. He just wants damage on the Calyrex. He just breaks the Focus Sash, very solid. And Edu, instead of opting for the Snarl, he goes for damage. He goes for the Astral Barrage. And this was a very interesting play. He just hard swaps the Zacian in and says, you know what, I'm willing to take damage / sleep turns. And Paul made a very good play. I'm going to pause it because Paul read into Gastrodon's Protect and he doubled that slot. If Calyrex stays in, it takes a Spatial Rend. It goes down unless it clicks Snarl. If it does click Snarl, it gets put to sleep as well. And then anything coming in is going to go to sleep. And he just ignores the Gastrodon slot, even though it could yawn. So that was a good read from Paul. Gets the Intimidate. You can't max the Palkia because of the yawn play. But he could have there, actually. He just probably thought yawn was going into the Palkia. But he could have gone for max Wormwind and into the Gastrodon. That would have been an amazing play there. But of course, it's understandable that he did not. Getting damage on the Zacian. Now, that was another first turn wake up from the Zacian, and that's really big. Edu reads the switch out. The Incineroar switch out, yawns the slot, even though he had just yawned it. This Gastrodon just putting so much pressure on, and this is really Edu's glue to his team in this matchup. The Gastrodon has to stay healthy. It's got to be super disruptive. It's got to scare Paul from Dynamaxing. It's got to make him continue to switch and not get too comfortable. And it's totally working right now. Now, Palkia has a Wiki Berry, but the berry does not activate because Calyrex is on the field with its Unnerve ability. And that's scary for Paul. But Amoonguss is in a great spot right now. So this is a big turn for Paul. He knows, in this turn at least, he's got Edu kind of pinned here. But he doesn't go for Spore, which is very surprising, I think. So choosing really not to pin his opponent, but just self-healing. I mean, which is solid. Like, it's so hard for Edu to put damage on the Palkia. Another switch. There's another yawn. Parting Shot weakens Palkia. Very similar to game 1. It's a flamethrower. So Paul was like, you're going to Parting Shot here. I think you're going to go out to Zacian. So I'm going to flamethrower that slot. Edu, one step ahead. I'm not going to put my Zacian in such a dangerous situation. It got burned by a flamethrower game 1. That would be potentially losing for me here in game 3 and top 4 of Worlds. I'm going to go into my Calyrex. Good play. Because he knows that, like, obviously the Palkia can't use a water move there because Gastrodon's on the field. It can't safely use Spatial Rend because the parting shot into Zacian play is on the table. So really Paul's middle ground safe play is the flamethrower play. So Edu just recognized that really well. Okay, now this is a big turn. This is the last turn of Trick Room. Paul, I think, has to get this right. This game is very much in the balance. No KOs yet, no Dynamax. Both players trying to get the positions right, trying to feel each other out. Edu is licking his chops like, Trick Room's almost done. Maybe I can finally do something once Trick Room is done. And Paul wants to make the most of this last turn. And back to the snowball thing. I think the first bit of snow in the snowball was when Gastrodon yawned the slot that is now the Calyrex on the last turn of Trick Room. And so that prevented Paul from being able to really get the ball rolling and make the most of that set of turns of Trick Room. Because another set of Trick Room turns went by and Paul wasn't able to do that much. And now the yawn goes off again, and Trick Room is done, and Paul's like, not in a great spot now. So he's got to make a defensive switch on a turn that he really would like to get Trick Room back up. You don't want Incineroar and Amoonguss on the field at the same time. And yet another yawn play comes out. This Gastrodon is just locking down the position for Edu. And Zacian gets a sub up. It's not even intimidated. The parting shot didn't go into Zacian. It is healthy. Paul does make the double up play into the Zacian with breaking the sub and going for Spore, but at what cost, right? Because the Amoonguss falls asleep. He finally let one of his Pokemon go to sleep from yawn. And, okay, sure, he got Zacian asleep, but Trick Room isn't up. His Palkia is yawned, I believe. Yeah, because it has to switch out. Paul's in a bad spot. And now he's just hoping. Zacian, please stay asleep for your max turns because otherwise I just get blown back here. Amoonguss swaps out, even though it's going to be asleep still to get health back, but man, this is rough. No Trick Room. He feels like he has to Dynamax a low health Incineroar and hope for the sleep turns, and he doesn't get the sleep turns. Now, if Zacian had stayed asleep, it would have been different for sure. I mean, Incineroar gets a KO on one of those Pokemon in the field. I'm not sure it would have changed the outcome, really. It would have kicked the can down the road a little bit, but I think Edu still wins, just because of the strong position he's in. You know, Incineroar would have had very little health left, would have gone down to anything. I think it was over, regardless. 3 turns of sleep may have saved Paul. But 1 or 2, I think it was over. Well, obviously 1, it was over. So now the snowball has just gotten massive and is tumbling down the mountain, and Edu's about to win 4-0. So again, I think it all started. Paul's in so much pain there. Look at him. And Edu goes on to finals the next day. I think it all started with Edu playing his Gastrodon so well and keeping it on the field and just keeping it healthy and clicking yawn. He didn't really have to do damage. He just had to pressure Paul enough with Jan that Paul was never comfortable and he was never able to get his offense rolling with trick room turns, with his trick room turns. And so that Jan, when the Calyrex switched in and there was one turn of trick room left, and Calyrex had to switch back out, which if you're Paul is just painful because you can't get your offense going. And I think that was the first little incremental shift in momentum that Edu just took and ran with, because then Trick Room was up and he had a strong Pokemon on the field at the right time, and he got the first turn Wake Up, of course, took down the Incineroar before it could even do anything. And that was game. Just an incredibly patient match by both players, and one that I know I'm going to go back many times over the years and watch again. Just so thrilling. Thank you guys for sticking with me this long. If you're still here, and I'd love any feedback in the comments. Anything about the pace of the video, anything about if there's volume issues or anything like that, or content you'd like to see, reaction analysis type stuff from Worlds and maybe one of the other sets. Any other thoughts from Worlds? We've had a few days now to reflect on what an amazing tournament it was, and so yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That's the last thing. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.